take their marching orders from Donald Trump, and when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal...
Let's go to the Clintons, Bill and Hillary. They've been asked to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee tomorrow and Wednesday, the President tomorrow, and the former Secretary of State on Wednesday. They're not going to show up. I'll be stunned if they show up. So what happens then?
Things spiral fast when Bill O'Reilly looks at Hillary Clinton, a congressional subpoena, and decides politeness is officially off the table. What follows is a no-filter breakdown of power, privilege, and what really happens when accountability comes knocking, and no one opens the door. The gloves come off, the hypocrisy meter goes into overdrive, and suddenly above the law sounds less like a principle and more like a bad joke. This was supposed to be routine. Instead, it detonated into political chaos, and nobody saw it coming.
If you have confidence in your government, right this moment in history, please let me know and tell me. All right, but apparently Hillary Clinton, I have confidence in it. And people are stupid because they don't watch MSNBC, which is the most rank propagandist network in the history of this country. NBC News, Comcast should be very, very proud.
If you're enjoying this breakdown, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you realize. Now here's where it really hits. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton refusing to appear before the House Oversight Committee lands hard, because for decades they branded themselves as protectors of institutions and champions of credibility. When the people who preached accountability won't show up for questions, the contrast is impossible to ignore, and the silence suddenly says more than any statement ever could.
Tonight, a basket of problems for Hillary Clinton. That is the subject of this evening's Huffington memo. Not since President William Henry Harrison died of reported pneumonia in 1841, just 32 days into his term, as that lung infection captured the imagination of American voters. As you most likely know by now, Hillary Clinton faltered at a 9/11 memorial on Sunday here in New York City. The campaign announcing afterwards she has pneumonia, something they knew.
When people who once sat at the very top of government start treating a congressional subpoena like a polite suggestion instead of a legal order, the idea of equal accountability starts to fall apart. Suddenly, justice doesn't look universal, it looks selective. And once that line gets crossed, the entire system starts feeling less like law and more like privilege in action.
Is this grand jury, is trying to go back and relitigate this, is potentially putting Obama-era people in jail a good thing for the country?
Yeah. That these people tried to derail an election, tried to hurt a sitting president by bogus, phony, false conspiracies, because that's what...
Isn't that called politics?
Using them to get...
That tension sits right at the core of Bill O'Reilly's criticism. He doesn't frame it as a partisan fight or an ideological clash, he frames it as a simple test of fairness. Do the rules apply to everyone, or only to some? O'Reilly's argument doesn't rely on political gymnastics or talking points. It rests on a basic premise that's hard to dodge: accountability only matters if it's applied evenly.
Is far overshadowed by the basket of deplorables.
Just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic.
A subpoena from the House Oversight Committee isn't a suggestion. It carries legal force whether it lands on a private citizen, a former president like Bill Clinton, or a former Secretary of State like Hillary Clinton. Ignoring it isn't protest or principle, it's a legal decision with real consequences. That reality doesn't bend for reputation, legacy, or years in public office. Alongside Bill O'Reilly, Attorney Bob Driscoll reinforces this point by pointing to recent precedent. Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon both refused congressional subpoenas, and both discovered that defiance isn't symbolic theater. It's a fast track to criminal penalties. Those cases settled the question. Contempt of Congress is enforced when the law is deliberately ignored.
To throw another face on that montage, and that's Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary Clinton's campaign began this. Now, Hillary Clinton is going to say, through her lawyer, look, I didn't know anything about it. It was all my surrogates, it was all my lesser people who did it. I didn't know. I don't know this, that, and the other. But she's going to be investigated on that. And if people start to flip underneath Hillary Clinton, in those who worked in her campaign, say, no. She was in a meeting on this date. She told us all.
The Clintons' connection to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation isn't presented as automatic guilt, but it is framed as a legitimate reason for scrutiny. Bill Clinton's documented travel history, including 26 trips on Epstein's private jet, raises questions investigators are obligated to examine. Some of those trips intersected with activities linked to the Clinton Foundation, increasing the need for clarification, not avoidance. Bill O'Reilly emphasizes that testimony exists to answer questions, not manufacture accusations. Hillary Clinton's refusal to testify carries additional weight given her long history of promoting transparency and institutional respect. When rhetoric about democratic norms collides with silence before Congress, critics see hypocrisy, not strategy. O'Reilly underscores that the phrase, "nobody is above the law," loses credibility when it's applied only to political opponents.
That's accurate. So I, your humble correspondent, kicked into reporter mode, and I found there are one sworn affidavit by a victim that Bill Clinton was on the island, and a guy named Doug Bann, Bill Clinton's top assistant post-presidency, who traveled with Putin on Epstein's plane. He's told Vanity Fair they went to the Virgin Islands where Epstein.
Without hesitation, Bill O'Reilly goes further. Even if someone believes Donald Trump's legal troubles were exaggerated or politically driven, a subpoena is not subjective, it's a clear legal obligation. Refusing to comply isn't an allegation, it's a violation. In O'Reilly's framing, the Clintons' defiance is more concrete than many of the claims they once dismissed. Bob Driscoll explains what follows. Once Congress determines a subpoena was ignored, the issue moves to the Department of Justice, where politics fade and prosecution begins. Titles, alliances, and past influence don't pause that process, which is why Navarro and Bannon ended up behind bars. O'Reilly argues that silence was a strategic mistake. Testifying would have allowed the Clintons to assert privileges, clarify facts, and challenge claims within the law.
Talking Points believes that Secretary Clinton made a big mistake, reminiscent of Mitt Romney saying that 47% of Americans would not vote for him because they want stuff. Every fair-minded person knows you cannot generalize about what is in people's hearts. And I do not include the far left under the banner of fair-minded.
He is attracting a certain type of voter. She gave a whole speech on describing them. They're called the alt-right.
Silence, by contrast, creates a vacuum, and vacuums invite suspicion. Bill O'Reilly argues that transparency, even when uncomfortable, is usually the safer path for anyone confident in their innocence. The moral weight of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes makes avoidance especially damaging. These investigations involve abuse and exploitation, subjects that demand seriousness, not evasion. Even indirect associations require scrutiny because public trust depends on visible accountability. The mention of the Clinton Foundation in connection with some travel only intensifies the need for answers. Charities survive on credibility, and unanswered questions erode it fast. O'Reilly frames congressional testimony as a chance to protect institutions, not weaken them. By refusing, the Clintons let critics write the story instead. And in the end, O'Reilly returns to consistency. If the rule of law applied to Navarro and Bannon, it must apply to Bill and Hillary Clinton too. Anything less turns justice into a political weapon, not a neutral system.